Hey everyone, it's Kristen, and I just released a brand new deck. This is the back of the cards. It's called Inner Flame Oracle Cards, and I just wanted to tell you a little bit about the deck and give you a quick flip through of the cards. So, this is a deck that I started creating earlier this year, and the way that it came about was I was noticing that I had different ebbs and flows with my creativity. So for me, every day is a creative day. Every day I'm really creating something, creating oracle decks or courses or something. And I found that just certain days were really great productive days, and certain days just didn't seem as productive. And I was really wondering how could I still use that energy towards creating something. So I really was just paying attention to it at that time. Some days I would just be really active and crossing things off my list and getting things done. And some days I was just really languid, like I was still being creative, but I didn't want to be creative at the computer. I just wanted to kind of sit and lounge around with my iPad and make art on my iPad. And so to me, those were all still stages and variations of creativity. And I thought around the same time, I had started looking more closely at the moon phases. So when the moon is in Virgo or the moon's in Gemini, the moon's in Libra, when the moon falls in different signs, it creates a different energy or vibration. And if you start tracking it, you probably will notice that your energy fluctuates with those changes as well. And so I was noticing those at the same time. And I thought this deck can really show, number one, kind of stages of a creative process, and also just the ebb and flow of your life, how you feel, at a certain time. And for me, that's helpful. I always create my decks based on a question or something, a problem that I want to solve. And for me, I was really just thinking that it would be helpful to get a sense of what that was before I even start my day, like to pick a card to get a sense of where my vibration is today so that I'll know not to get frustrated if I'm not getting things done or crossing things off my list, that today might just be a rest day, or today might be a renewal day. Today might be a day of stillness. And so that was really what prompted me to create the deck. And for me, the flame is a great representation of creativity. That's just kind of how I think of it. I think of it as very fiery. Very fire to me is also inspiration and just kind of like that hot, fiery energy, which I associate with creativity. But really, it's a deck you can use for anything. I mean, any type of project, any type of growth, any type of process, and also, again, just understanding your natural rhythms on a day-to-day basis. So in what I started with was 20 images. And actually, I just kind of was playing with the flame images first. And what I had to do is once I realized kind of what I had with the deck, I started over again. So I went back to the drawing board, redrew the flame, and did 40 different images. And I did write down first the steps or stages that I thought of for my personal creative process. And it's not like an exact thing, but it's just, it's certain periods of time. There's a lot of action and energy, movement. And then certain times it's like the flame has burned out, you've blown it out, and it's quiet, and maybe you're tired, you're exhausted because you've been doing all this work, and it's just a time for stillness. So that was really what I was trying to create with these cards. So I want to just do a walkthrough with you, just show you each card. I designed them in a particular order. This is in essence my beginning and ending of the creative process, but again, it's not quite exact. I really put these in places very intuitively based on where I was at that moment in time in terms of how I saw my creativity. So you may find that your creative flow looks a little different than this, um, but this is kind of what it felt like to me. And when you look at these cards, they're each, it's based on one, it's based on one candle. So all of the cards began with this first image, and then I added different flames to them. So the first card is rest. This is the state where you have the candle and you haven't lit it yet. So this could be before you begin a creative project, for example. And again, like I said, this is a deck, just like most of my decks, where I don't want to tell you what the card means. It's really about, I always use the word, the message that's there. Some of you I know will look at the image and you'll get more from that. But I really want you to just take into consideration how you think the word, the message on the card can apply to your situation. So the first card is rest, and then renewal. To me, rest always comes before renewal. Sometimes we need to have a phase where we just don't do anything. We get like replenished. So we're ready to begin something new. Foundation is 3. And for me, this is really about building up that foundation from rest, renewal. You got to build a foundation before you're even ready to create something. And then we get into need, which is 4. Sometimes a creative impulse begins with a need. There's something missing, for example. 5 is question. For me, as I said, every deck that I create begins with a question. How do I answer this type of question? How would I respond to somebody if they ask me a question about whatever? How do I do X, Y, and Z? So to me, there's always a question that really begins a creative phase. Potential is 6. And potential for me is kind of close to the vision. You're just looking at what could be at this stage. 7 is inspiration. Inspiration to me is getting that kind of flash of insight or intuition. I don't have an intuition card in the deck. And I think for me is that intuition is through the whole process. It's involved in every single stage. But inspiration is kind of like when you get inspired to do something. Maybe someone inspires you, or maybe you have some inspiration from a specific source and you just feel compelled to do something. 8 is hope. And, like I said, a lot of these are just about being at a stage in your creative process where it's still, you haven't done anything yet. These are just things that are inspiring you, or you have a hope or a dream to do something. Ideas is 9. Ideas for me are really important because I always have a ton of ideas. That's why I actually did 3 little flames, because to me, an idea doesn't come in 1. It usually comes in 2 or 3 or 5. The next one, 10, is play. There's always a process for me in the creative flow where there's got to be play. Like you're playing with ideas, you're playing with concepts. 11 is fantasy. Sometimes that play gets really big and it becomes just like a fantasy of what you want to happen or what you believe you can do. And I also think sometimes when you get too much fantasy, there is a kind of a suppression. And so I do have a couple of cards, stagnation, and we're going to see one later, restraint, that are kind of like not a complete block on your creativity, but to me that is part of the creative flow, is that sometimes there's a periods of stagnation or restraint that I believe help to guide you. Sometimes you can get too big with your ideas and you need to start narrowing them down. 13 is choice, making choices and decisions. 14 is clarity. This is getting clear about what you want to do. 15 is commitment. And 16 is action. So from choice through this one, choice is really about, sometimes you have different choices and you've got to figure out what path you want to take. So action is to the point where you're actually doing something. So we're at card 16, and for me, card 16 is really where we start doing things. You know, all of the cards before this, we haven't really started anything yet. 17 is growth. 18 is instability. I do find in my creative process that sometimes once I actually get started and it starts to grow, I start actually putting effort in, there is a period of instability where it seems like things get really shaky and wobbly and I start questioning, should I do this? Or, doubt comes in. 19 is opposition. And I realized that, sometimes you have a creative project that maybe you're working on with someone else, that there is another person involved. So sometimes there is opposition to your creative idea or whatever you want to do. And a lot of times the opposition or the other person is still you. So you can think of any of these cards like opposition, conflict, as also inner conflict or inner opposition, kind of like different sides of yourself battling to see which one is going to win out creatively. And then after conflict is surrender. There's usually a point where you surrender to something, you surrender to some idea or some path, and in the face of opposition and conflict, even if it's an internal conflict, there really has to be something, an idea or concept or path or decision that you are surrendering to. And I think that once you surrender, then there's room for collaboration. And again, this could be with another person or a group or just a sense of collaborating with your inner selves. 23 is boundaries. And with boundaries, to me, it's always about, again, still possibly dealing with other people. There have to be boundaries between you and what you might consider the other in terms of your creative process. And I find that boundaries are really important in terms of creating, because you have to know who you are and where you end and someone else's ideas begin. Make sure that you're always doing your own personal creative thing. 24 is focus. And so this is really about, you already have your idea, you're acting on it, but sometimes you need to refocus and get focused again on your plan. 25 is strategy. Sometimes you need more than focus and a great idea. You need a good strategy for how you want to execute your plan or your creative project. 26 is passion. And so passion to me is another really important feature of creativity. Passion is about what you want, what you desire. It's I made this flame like kind of going off of the card, because to me that's what passion does. It's kind of consuming. It's bigger than you are sometimes, and that passion can help you get to the end of your project. Sometimes there's a lull there, and the passion, that energy, can help you to get to the end. 27 is risk, and sometimes we have to take risks with our creative projects, and this is a card that's showing you're in that kind of stage where a risk might be necessary to move forward. 28 is freedom, and I made this flame going out in different directions. That's really kind of what freedom looks like to me. It's the ability to stretch yourself in a lot of different ways and break free from whatever constraints are around you. 29 is flow. And flow is, I keep talking about creative flow. So sometimes you feel like you're in a creative flow and sometimes you're not. That creative flow for me just feels like everything is easy. It feels like the ideas are coming easily. You're creating whatever your vision is and things are just moving along. Transformation to me is really kind of like the last card, although the next card is actually completion. Transformation is transforming what you're doing into something else. So it's kind of like when I have a deck idea and I create the images for it, but it's not a deck yet. I have to put those images and create like an actual concept for it, and it becomes transformed when I actually put those into some type of format and run it through Printer Studio and get some cards printed. And then you have an idea that's actually transformed and manifested into something. And 31 is completion. And so for me, completion is like I said, 16 was action. That was kind of like when you actually start working. Completion at 31 is really when you finish working, when you've actually completed your project, when you've manifested something. 32 is consequences. And consequences are what comes after, what's in the aftermath of your creation. If you're creating, art, a piece of art, and you finally are done, what happens next? What are the consequences of your actions? And 33 is restraint. And this is a card that is really after everything. There's, for me, there's often a period where I've finished everything and there is an inner desire to start something else. There's kind of like once you're kind of like still high on the energy of creating something. But this is the card where you're blowing out the candle. So remember, this was the same candle we've been using, and the candle has just been changing and flickering and moving and doing all of these different things. The flame has been doing all of that. And now we're ready to blow out the candle. So there's that first sense of restraining that energy. And then the next cards after these, actually all the way till the end, to the 40th card, are gray. So you'll see the flame has turned gray because it's actually been blown out. This is the residual energy from that flame. So 34 is depletion. Sometimes when you finish a creative project, there's a sense of feeling depleted. And 35 is emptiness. And that sense of depletion can lead to a kind of an emptiness. You feel again like something's missing, like you want to fill up that space with something else. 36 is exhaustion. And for me, that often feels like exhaustion. It's kind of like I've done all of the work, and but it's like my body and my mind and my spirit don't realize that it's time to rest yet. So I will just feel exhausted. It's kind of like my body's way of saying it's time to rest. But when you get these cards that are in gray, what it can be showing you is that you have finished a project, a creative phase, and it is time for you to rest, but it's like you haven't figured that out yet. And that kind of leads us into 37, confusion. It's like, what do I do now? What should I, work on next? And the answer is there's nothing to work on. When, like I said, when you get to these gray cards, I deliberately made quite a few of them because I really wanted to acknowledge that aspect of the creative process when there isn't anything to do. And then once you accept the confusion and the depletion and the emptiness, then you can reach a point of stillness. So 38 is stillness, and this is really where you're still, but you're not wanting to do anything. These are to me representing the days where I wake up and I don't feel compelled to create anything, and I'm okay with it. And so that leads us into 39, which is acceptance. And so that acceptance is that it's okay. Some days you may not be as productive as other days. Some days you may not feel creative. And acceptance means that you're at a certain peace with that. And then the very last card is release. And for me, release is about, moving through stillness and acceptance and being able to release the energy of that last creative phase or creative project that you just went through. I think that's really important to let it go. Like, you don't have to keep holding on to it, try to create something else off of it, or try to hold on to that energy. Because 40 with release, and we just see just the smoke billowing away with the flame. This is the final end to that flame. It leads us back into the first card, which is rest. So it's like starting with a brand new candle, or starting with that candle unlit again. So we can see that once you release that old energy, it's time for you to go back into a rest phase, so you can start that whole creative process over again. So I hope that long-winded walkthrough gives you an overview of the cards and helps you understand my perspective and how I created them. As I said before, I really look forward to seeing how people use my cards. You don't have to use them in any particular way. Use them in whatever way feels right for you. I have sometimes used them for just like a daily read, just to get a sense of, again, my energy for the moment, or my energy for a particular project, like what stage am I really in? Because I will tell you, I don't always know. I really don't. There was a particular creative project that I was working on, and I felt like there was lots of things that I needed to be doing. And I think, I'm trying to remember which card it was, but I think I got something like emptiness, which told me there wasn't anything to do. This was like an in-between phase. So even though I felt compelled to work on something and put my energy into something, that emptiness card said there's nothing to do. There's a feeling that there's something missing, but right now, because the gray shows that we've already blown out the flame, there's nothing really to do in this in-between time. So it's just waiting, resting, going through a rest phase and then renewal again. I have also used it when I feel like I'm procrastinating on something, and the issue, I think, what did I get? It was like, what's the problem? And I got completion, and I was like, yes, I'm having trouble finishing a project. But the advice that I got, the guidance, I asked for guidance of how to move forward, and I got play. So that tells me that instead of being like strict about, creating deadlines and things like that, that I need to be more open-ended with my time and just get back to the play and the pleasure of the project. So I would love to know how you use the Inner Flame Oracle cards, and please let me know if you have any questions. Enjoy.